That's fine. Okay, this might not make it to the light of day.
Nah, that's fine.
Questions?
Even you can even put it on there. I mean, what have you chosen?
Sip it, sniff it.
Sniff it, sip it, score it.
Sniff it.
60-second whisky
Sniff
review.
it, score it. Love it.
You've got to stand up or shall we do it sitting down?
Sit down.
Bear in mind, cost of a dram. So
Oh, she didn't know the cost of my dram.
what did it cost? What's a bottle cost? What are you picking a bottle of?
That's a bottle for 130 quid.
Are we doing the stand up? Sorry.
Do you want to do
21?
stand up or sitting down?
I'm happy to go first.
Sit
if
down.
you want.
Sit down, right? We'll do it sit down. Right, you ready?
Ready when you are.
Pete, are you ready to be part of this? This is like history.
I'm not fucking part of this. Am I?
No.
I'm the lemon in the corner.
Right.
So are you going to actually ask me
welcome along
questions,
and
or
sniff.
am I just going to speak?
I'm going to say sniff it. Welcome along, sniff it, sip it, score
Yep.
it. 60-second whisky review. Got Angus, and then I'll go straight into the questions. Don't say
Quick
anything
fire.
until I get.
Aye.
Okay. We're ready.
Let's go.
Right, 3, 2. 1. Welcome along to Sniff It, Sip It, Score It, 60-second whisky review with the Whisky Stories podcast. I've got Angus. Angus, what have you got?
I have got Edredauer, 10-year-old.
Single malt, blend or grain?
It's a single malt whiskey.
What region?
It's from the Highlands.
Where about in the Highlands?
It's from a little town called Pitlochry.
Tell me about the distillery.
So it's one of the smallest distilleries producing single malt whiskey in Scotland. It's a very old distillery, founded in 1825.
Style, flavour profile.
So style and flavour profile. So I think it's sherry and bourbon cask, but it's very heavy on the sherry. You can tell by the colour.
Maturation type.
Maturation type.
Casks.
Yep, casks, whiskey casks.
ABV.
ABV is 40%.
Cost for a dram.
Cost for a dram, you could pick up the bottle.
10 seconds.
For,
Cost for a bottle.
Cost for a bottle, you can pick up the bottle for about 45
Sniff
pounds.
it. Sip it.
3 seconds, give us a score.
Score it.
6.5 out of 10.
That could be good. That could be shite.
I don't know. I thought you would want me to. That was
You
mad.
really did mean 60 seconds.
Alright, it's got to be 60 seconds. It's going in a reel. It's going in a reel. It's got to be. Right. Ready.
Do I need this? I don't need this.
I have it. It's just adds to the tension. Okay. Ready. 3, 2, 1. Ross Bar, 60 seconds. Sniff it, sip it, score it. Whisky reviews. What have you got?
Glenfiddich 21.
Single malt, blend or grain.
It's a single malt.
Great. Region.
Speyside.
Where about in Speyside?
Dufton.
Tell me about the distillery.
It was founded in 1887. Built by a family.
Style, flavour profile.
Soft as a baby's shite. Easy going. Sweet.
Maturation cask types.
21 years in bourbon, 6 months in rum.
ABV.
40.
Cost for a dram.
Too much.
Oh.
Probably about 20 quid a dram at least.
Cost for a bottle.
About 140 quid.
Sniff it. What you getting?
It's very light.
Sip it.
Never been made to do this before. It's very light.
Score it.
7.
Okay.
7? Are you fucking kidding me?
I'll be saying wrong if you get the answer wrong.
Don't say wrong. We're just.
Incorrect.
I'm nervous, eh?
Right, ready?
Yeah.
Sniff it, sip it, score it.
Yeah. 60-second whisky review.
Me. Okay.
One take.
Graham Kilgour. Sniff it, skip it. Oh.
Start again.
Sniff it, sip it.
Graham Kilgour. Sniff it, sip it, score it. What have you got?
I've got an Ardbeg 10.
Oh, what kind of whiskey is that?
It's a single malt.
Where's it from?
Isla. Typically the southwest.
East.
South of the island.
It is on the South Island, that's correct. Tell me about the distillery.
Well, it was founded in 1815. It's on Isla. It actually uses the most phenolic, which is smokiest, peated malt. And it sold the most expensive cask to this date for $19 million.
Yeah, it's an American lady. Tell me about the flavour profile.
Well, smoky and peaty, quite salty, and also very sweet.
Maturation here?
98% bourbon cask, 2% sherry.
Oh. Right, so you've been studying ABV.
Oh, 43.
Oh, is it?
46.
Cost for a dram.
£4 at the digger for 35ml.
Cost for a bottle.
45 to 50 quid.
Okay, you got 5 seconds. Sniff it, score it.
As expected, 7.5.
Very good. That was...
Might need a bit of work, lads.
I like it. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of it.
It's chaos.
I don't know fucking clue.
Like the whiskey, it's got legs.
I think
There you go.
that'll be quite good on the Facebook page anyway.
Aye, well, the thing is, they keep a reel under a minute, and then it's just scrollable content. There you go. That's it.
So, put a jazzy soundtrack over it.
That's exactly the plan. Right.
Our Big 10 is 46%.
46. I did say 43, maybe
Give
46.
me a 97% bourbon cask. Kind of a fucking
98. Right. You've got your microphone working there, Pete. Let's get ready to rock and roll.
Let's get podcasting.
Okay.
This is whiskey.
Let's
Right.
make a podcast.
Everybody hear me okay? Angus?
I can hear you. That's yours, by the way.
I know
that.
You know what to do. Clap us in, aye?
Oh, right. Okay.
Welcome along to the Whisky Stories podcast with myself, Graham Cogar. We are back in the Athletic Arms, and guess who is back sitting beside me, freshly married, all the way back from the US of A. I've got little Ross Barr. How are you, Ross?
Howdy, gent. Nice to see
Tell you what, if you didn't know that you were a wee fat guy before the second last episode, you certainly do now. How was the wedding?
It was good. It was busy. I'll be honest with you. It was way too hot as well. But we're here. I'm happy to be home. To be honest, I'm missing Scotch whisky as well. But I've been listening, and I've got to say, they've had a great effort. I think we should shout out Vicky as well.
Yeah.
What a trooper. So if I need a late substitution, I think that's a good one to vote for. I'm very jealous, obviously. Whisky Fringe. It was fantastic. It sounded really good. I will have to make a slight comment. You're a very generous podcast, at least on my wedding day. And I won't kind of... for people that haven't listened to it, it's well worth listening to.
Give it a listen.
And I'm going to tell you that 90% of the stories there were fairly accurate. There was one elderly guest who I won't name.
Your whiskey grandad.
Let's call him that. One elderly guest who retold a story in his own magical way. And I won't go back into what exactly wasn't so accurate, but I'm glad that he's not locked at the house, and I'm glad that
Well,
I'm glad it went down well. And I do really appreciate the effort he's went into, gentlemen. It was really entertaining.
it was a big lineup for the night. We had, you had...
Duggie, Cam,
Yeah.
an older gentleman called Mark Thompson.
Who's the older gentleman?
Mark Thompson.
Right, yeah. Grandad.
And then what we'll say,
Sam Cuthbert,
I
Dougie
listened
Liddell.
to that in the morning before I got married.
Well,
me and my
it's-
dad listened to it, and we had that dram of 1968 Tom and Tool as well. So that was the last dram I had
Tom and
before I
Tool.
got married as well. Yeah, I'm going with Tom and Tool.
And, I mean, the wedding itself then, you're over there, were you all kilted up?
Aye, I managed to find a piper in northern rural Michigan as well.
I heard the piper.
It was
What,
good.
from Carsebridge?
I mean, when I joined the,
Oh, of course.
the line.
I accidentally joined the call about half an hour before everybody else joined the call because I thought it was 8 rather than
That's
half 8.
right, yeah.
And then I realised there was no one letting me in, so I was like, oh wait, it's actually half 8. And then I did join, and I think some of your kind of distant relatives were on the call as well because it was very much kind of.
Well, Annie's for
a
Kilmarnock
lot,
as well.
of aunties from Kilmarnock going, how do I work this?
Yeah.
And but it was great.
The piper
I
he was brilliant.
I
Actually.
I actually enjoyed all the piping music before the. It was a good piper.
It was good. And I tell you what, it was like $300 or something. He was only there for half an hour, but the fact that he managed to get a piper to there,
Yeah.
and he piped for 15 minutes while people arrived, and then he had his son took his work off and brought his snare drum.
Oh,
so they
brilliant.
done Highland Cathedral for me coming out. It was epic.
Brilliant.
It's something that I kind of put together a wee bit last minute, but I'm really glad I'd done it.
And is that on video? Did you get off?
I recorded it as
And
well. So
will you see in the video, like, your current wife's dad with a gun behind you in your back getting you down?
Did you just call her your
Current
current
wife.
wife?
Yes.
So you-
Current wife.
It's a little bit of an
That's a good way
running
for us
joke.
to
Well, hang on
introduce
2 seconds.
our
I just want to say that I have been looking at the demographics and the numbers for the Whisky Stories podcast, and now that Little Ross Barr is the final one to be a taken man of the podcast, the female listenership has dropped massively.
from 3 to 2.
That's it. But yes, we do have Peter Allison from Woven. How are you, Peter?
Hello, thank you very much. Yeah, good, thanks. Very well.
Welcome along to the Whisky Stories podcast. It's been a bit of nonsense for the last 45 minutes, just sort of getting you loosened up and ready for this. But how's it been? How are you?
I've enjoyed watching you set up. It's a very impressive podcast setup.
I think people are always quite like, he actually kind of knows what he's doing here.
Believe it or not, yeah, we know what we're doing. And we've got Angus here as well.
I'm
Angus,
here, yes.
How's things?
Brilliant, excellent, really good.
Really
You've been drinking a lot of good whiskey for the last couple of weeks.
Oh, we've had a great
We've
time.
been spoilt for choice.
Yeah.
We've actually, I mean, honestly, it's probably been the best time to have had the podcast since when you've been away. I mean, we've never. Everyone's managed to get a word in. Everyone's managed to actually say their piece on the pod. It's been fantastic. But more importantly, we've had some great whiskey, and I'm looking forward to trying some more. And guess what? We actually, for later on the podcast, we have our own little treat for you, a little wedding gift from Angus, myself, and Duggie Liddell from Royal Mile Whiskies. Big thank you to Royal Mile Whiskies, I should say, for inviting us along to Whisky Fringe, just letting us go rogue, really, running
He's
around.
in early as well.
And because you couldn't make Whisky Fringe, we've brought Whisky Fringe to you.
Well, I
we've got
appreciate
in our own little
And
way.
we have to, part of the challenge, which we will see on the video that we will be releasing with this podcast, is we were set a challenge by Duggie Liddell.
Okay.
15 minutes before the end of Whisky Fringe. So you've been here all day, you've had plenty of time to think about it. You've got one sample bottle each. Go and find a dram for Ross Barr for when he comes home that he will absolutely love.
Okay.
And we had to, with all the exhibitors that were there, with everybody that we'd spoken to, with all the whiskey that we had tried, at that stage of the episode of the day. I think if you do listen back to the episode at that stage, we're pissed, eh?
And all the good stuff's gone.
Well, there was some kicked
He's
aside,
got the
believe
drinks.
me. But there was a frantic 10-15 minutes of us roaming through. Angus actually rampaging through the top floor,
Nice.
barging people out the way with those big
Yeah.
rugger bugger shoulders, knocking everybody down.
Yeah, because I mean, we'd set up downstairs in the garden, and I managed to pick a whiskey from the.
Don't tell anymore.
Well, I'll
he looks at the exhibit list.
Did you
I'll just
get
say
the whiskey
it was
that you
at,
wanted?
it was at the stall, the furthest away from where I was at that point.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah,
you know.
it was a big run. But anyway, we will come back to that as the episode
Yes,
progresses, because we do have Peter here from Woven.
Absolutely.
Pete, tell us a little bit about yourself. What
About myself.
About yourself. What got you into whiskey?
Well, yeah, let's not talk about the current role. Let's start at a young. You're from Edinburgh.
Right, yeah, I'm from Edinburgh.
Thanks,
born-
Pete.
And you've been working in whiskey for a while. How did that kind of start?
After school, I started working in bars, and that's really where I cut my teeth. I think for a long time, I was Edinburgh's slowest bartender. Widest elbows, shittest drinks. That was me.
Nice.
Any particular places that you worked that you want to give a shout out to?
Opal Lounge, 2004.
Opal Lounge.
Opal. I think I remember Opal, yeah.
Making Moscow mules and flirtinis for anybody that fancied it.
What is a flirtini?
It sounds right up your street, eh? Is it just like a Japanese slipper?
Just for Ross. It was back in the day where if you put jam in a daiquiri, you're a molecular gastronomist, and I thought I was that. But
That's when you started developing your palate, obviously.
well, I tell you what, actually, it taught me how to balance drinks.
Okay.
Right? And that's essentially what I've essentially ended up doing, is balancing drinks. But working in bars was always great fun, loved it. Ended up moving down to London, doing the same thing whilst at university. And then after university, I got a job with a beer company called Innocent Gun,
Oh, yeah.
who mature their beer in whiskey casks.
That's right, yeah.
Or they did. I was employee number 7 or 8 or something like
Oh,
that.
really? So that early on?
Wow.
Yeah. It was
Wow.
it was early days in that business, and so you were sort of ended up doing a lot of different things. But I moved from Innocent Gun into sherry, actually. So I went to work for a company called Gonzalez Bias, which is just a large sherry producer in Jerez.
Massive.
Yeah, well, the biggest actually.
Yeah.
I don't know why I say large. The biggest.
In particular, when we're talking about whiskey and sherry, you always see Gonzalez Baez.
Yeah,
Casks being
absolutely.
used, yeah.
Yeah, if you look at something like Dalmore, then they actually have a sort of a naming partnership with them, and they take from a specific bodega actually a specific Solera in a specific bodega in one of the warehouses, and so sherry and whiskey's obviously been very closely linked forever, and I ended up getting to know a lot of the whiskey industry through sherry.
So were you UK based in that role?
I was actually international.
Oh, wow.
So my job was to manage their spirits program. So they had some Spanish brandies, a whiskey called Nomad, which was developed with Richard Patterson at White and Mackay, and Antonio Flores, who's the winemaker at Gonzalez Baez, as well as some sort of white label stuff and a few other things. But part of the job was also to help out with some of the cask sales, obviously empty casks coming from the sherry industry. A lot of it gets pumped into big clients, Edrington, White and Mackay, Bacardi, whoever that might be. But there's a number that aren't every month, every 3 months, whenever it is. And so one of my roles was to sort of auction them off, and be able to manage sort of the overflow. And so I got to know a lot of the whiskey industry. And so after Gonzalez Baez, I moved to Edrington, working for the Macallan. And I took a role in advocacy and marketing and sort of, I guess, single bottle sales, but over in the Middle East. So I was based in Dubai, managing sort of the Middle East, India, and North Africa.
Developing markets kind of role at the time, or?
Absolutely, they have a lot of money there as well.
Yeah.
There's a fair bit of money, and so if you've got allocation of a fine and rare Macallan, then you can bet your bottom dollar that they're gonna want it. And so you had fantastic sort of opportunities to be able to go into quite strange places, air bases in the middle of Iraq, and up to sort of going out to Egypt and middle of India and places just to sell single bottles.
So it's just, so you say single bottles, and you're literally just talking about one bottle.
You'd be like Masters of Photography or something like that, and you would have like
Masters of Photography is
not even close.
Fucking.
Oh yeah.
Aye, that's nothing. Peanuts.
I mean, do you mind asking? Where's the entry level for? Like, what are you talking? To send somebody to an air base in Iraq to sell a bottle of whiskey, what are you looking at returning with for that value?
100 grand.
Really?
200 grand
for a bottle.
For a bottle, yeah.
That's a lot more than Masters of Photography series.
And it would be a fine and rare, a mid-40s fine and rare,
and
for
are you
example,
doing that?
or
Are you doing that individually? You just going? Have you got a team of folk with you? Are you? I mean, is there
no.
somebody?
I was very much a small link in the chain.
Right.
I mean, I'd love to take the credit, but if this is actually going out, then
you were just the guy with the white gloves carrying the case.
Yeah, exactly, the roadie.
You must have met some, outrageous characters and seen some really interesting parts of the world doing that.
You met a lot of interesting characters, a lot of self-made people, a lot of very, very good people as well, and some total arseholes.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it was a widespread, but yeah, the area is amazing.
Yeah.
The Middle East is especially for the whiskey environment, right?
Yeah.
You have a lot of people with money, and they do actually have a lot of taste. Like, they really, really want to understand and know about why they're buying this, what they're buying, what's in it, what the heritage is of it.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, they're people that are successful because they're geeks, and they want to geek out on what you're doing. So it's an amazing place, and I would never put it down at all. But could only do a few years because it was quite hectic.
It's not India's an interesting one when you look at these countries, and you don't often associate whiskey with these countries and things like that because of the sort of widespread of some religions and cultures accept alcohol, some religions and cultures absolutely don't. And then there's also the fact that, like, I know India quite well. My wife's Indian. We've been over there quite a few times.
Cool.
And you look at the percentage of people that have something and people that can afford to buy whiskey.
Yeah.
Even just like we couldn't afford to have Glenfiddich 12 at our wedding because it was £150 a bottle because of the taxation over there. But then what you look at is the wealth in these areas, and as you've said, there are people out there who are absolutely mad for Scotch whiskey and are happy to spend that kind of money on it. Do they drink it, or are they going down the collectible route? Are these guys buying 100 grand's worth of whiskey so that they can say, I've got 100 grand's worth of whiskey sitting on my shelf, and it's like, look what I've got? Or are they buying this whiskey to go, I'm going to really sit down and enjoy this or share it or anything like that?
I think you saw a widespread, right? And you definitely get the people that, I remember there's a fantastic man in Lebanon, which is an interesting country. we shouldn't go into the politics of these places, but very interesting country and a lot of history around kind of wealth and poverty at the same time. And this guy has a hotel as well as shares in lots of the Lebanese companies, but he buys the Macallan exclusively to collect and to drink.
Right.
And so when I rocked up to him, I was coming in talking about a Lalique bottling, so in a crystal decanter, very, very dear. I think it was one of maybe 50 bottles, something like that. He was buying it, which was great, but he decided to open up some absolutely insane whiskies. We're talking Macallans from the 40s, 50s, because he wanted to share it.
Yeah.
And that's his style. And a lot of these guys, what I found were that they wanted to share their passion with you. And so I was in a very privileged position, and I hear you when you talk about India, and it's got a huge wealth divide. I can't lie, it felt a bit strange.
Yeah,
and I think that was one of the reasons for moving back to the UK, because I think you saw. I saw an area of the industry that I love and an area of the industry that I didn't like.
I think to go from the on-trade to a super luxury, account and traveling that part of the world.
Yeah.
You've seen everybody that's interested in whiskey at that point.
Absolutely.
I think it's an interesting point about Scotch whisky where we're so lucky, and I'd say I remember hearing someone talk about this with golf, and I mean this with the greatest respect, because I think I told this to somebody and they kind of took it the wrong way. But the guy said about golf is Scotland's the only country in the world where golf is a classless sport. Now, some people look at it and go, classless is, you've no class. But what actually they mean is that Scotland's the only country in the world where we can have council golf clubs and anybody from any background can actually get a second-hand set of golf clubs and reasonably walk onto a golf course and play around the golf.
Yeah.
And I would say Scotland, probably one of the only countries in the world where whiskey is very similar in the sense that you can walk into a local boozer in any town, in any country, in any village, town, city in Scotland, and there'll be a whiskey that you can drink at a very affordable rate. Some whiskey, with some bars you can go in and you can have it like we've talked about with the Scotch of Balmoral, where you can have a whiskey at an affordable rate and a whiskey at astronomical rate. But when you actually start to go around the world, as I was saying, Bangalore, the area there, Karnataka has got one of the heaviest taxations on whiskey out there. £150 for one bottle of Glenfiddich 12, and you just go, that is, for people in India and other parts of the world which is similar, to have the luxury of just being able to try a single malt whiskey is something that they've never ever been able to have.
You come to a pub like this that has 800 open bottles, 35ml pours, and drams start at £2.50.
Yeah, fantastic.
I mean, I think that's a really you're a wise guy. I like that.
Thanks.
It's clever. Do you think it's still like that in Scotland? I mean, the Diggers is a minority, right?
This is old school.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where you're actually, like, it strikes an interesting conversation and debate about, we've heard it from other guests on the podcast, whilst we've been recording and whilst we've not, just in general conversation, is the whiskey industry is becoming very, very expensive.
Yeah.
When you look at the prices of what single malts are starting to come in at, you're looking at what distilleries are charging.
When you look at cask prices as a buyer,
well, this is what we'll get onto. Suddenly it's you look at that and you start saying, I mean, we've talked a little bit about it throughout the year of doing this recording.
George
I guess
Thibault was a really good conversation about it. And
well, we've mentioned about bubbles bursting, whiskey locks. You look at history repeating itself and stuff like that. But ultimately, you're right. There's got to be a question raised: is if every bottle keeps getting more expensive, then places like Diggers and Kev has to end up putting their prices up, which eventually over time will soon price out the sort of general whiskey drinker.
And there's so many different assets and so many different things to think about with that. We've spoken a lot about the new distilleries, had a lot of youthful distilleries on the podcast as well. And will that bubble burst? If malt whiskey and aged malt whiskey is now getting to a level really where people can't afford it, a bottle 18-year-old single malt whiskey is £120 to £150 now, pretty much.
I mean, and what one, I think we've spoken about it before. For example, as a case in point, Talisker 18.
Yeah,
that was something maybe 5 years ago you could pick up for something like £60 or £70.
correct, yeah.
But now you would probably struggle to find it for anything less than 200 if I'm not wrong.
Yes, it was rebottled very
I mean,
similar.
I know it was.
We had a guest on the podcast talking about it, not on the podcast, but they visited the distillery, Talisker, around about the time when the bottles, the new bottles had changed and the price had changed. But they had the old bottles on the shelf with the new price. So basically, you can say that, you know, and I don't think, I mean, we are open for sponsorship if anyone
It's all malt whiskey, and it's generally single malt whiskey that is kind of course, blended whiskey and actually vatted whiskey is still 90% of the industry is what we're seeing. But there's a massive appetite for malt whiskey, and numbers of bottled malt whiskey being sold is much higher than it's ever been.
It does boil down to demand and supply. The price has risen because the demand is there.
And that's marketing, isn't it?
Well, it's not marketing; it's just economic forces.
But also, like
the demand is there for something like a Talisker 18. You know, when it was priced, you know what it was. They couldn't keep the shelves from being empty.
Remember something like Talisker 18. It's a good example, right?
Yeah.
But that's moved from being a niche product,
right,
to being
a luxury product.
To being a luxury product, and that change from being niche to luxury has meant that they've been able to increase the price. Saying that though, costs have gone up massively.
Yeah, of course.
You know,
energy costs.
a lot of these guys' margins haven't quadrupled overnight. Some of them have, sure, but you know, if you think about Talisker, even just movement out of Islay, like you were able to ship from Islay for next to nothing 20 years ago,
right?
And now it's a considerable cost even just to get onto the mainland.
Yeah, and when you look at the industry, are there trend setters, price setters? Like you could look at, we're talking about Talisker there, Diageo owned distillery. Diageo probably are the largest. Could they sit there and dictate, and then everybody else goes, well, if Diageo can do it with their distilleries by bumping up a price by X%, then we can all follow it? Or is it like the Macallan? Maybe the Macallan is a standalone brand, or Edgington, I suppose. But Macallan being, if Macallan can go, we can sell whiskey at this price, does everybody else, all the other distilleries, rub their hands together and go, oh brilliant, if Macallan are charging X for their 18-year-old or 21-year-old,
you can't blame them because it sells.
But then your argument is like, would the Macallan not start getting annoyed about the quality, saying, well, hang on a minute, we can charge this because we can justify raising our prices because here's a level and standard of quality. Your distillery down the road there, who you know, they don't do the same that we do to guarantee quality.
I draw attention to the inverse of that as well, though, right? Think about what's happening on the supermarket shelves in single malts. You're able to go to Sainsbury's, Tesco's, whatever it is, and have a look at their shelf and see single malts, non-age statements, but also age statements now, Jura, Auchentoshan, these types of things. And they're looking at sub 40 quid, 35 quid.
25, 30 pounds.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, especially if you see one on offer, for example, you know,
he knows it. Marks and Spencer Sparks card comes out when go home and bring out their M&S special edition. Angus is straight in.
But I mean, I for example, I've seen, you know, I think Old Pulteney 12, you can sometimes find a great whiskey.
You can find it
love it.
30 quid.
You can find that quite easily if you turn up in the right supermarket at the right time. Sub £30, 26, 27 pounds.
Glenfiddich 15 is offering a club card deal for £32.
2 years ago, 2022, I was looking on the shelves at Tesco's and I saw Jura, right? Age statement 10.
Yeah.
I was able to buy a bottle of Jura. I would be able to, with taxes, duties all paid, even all of the supermarket margins, I'd be able to take that to my warehouse, decant it back into cask, and have that at a cheaper price than I was able to see it on the open market as a cask.
So you could fill a cask of Jura with that
from the shop.
From the shop.
So you could so
that's incredible, isn't it?
So that's.
But there lies the weirdness of this industry, right? Because you've got supermarket, you've got mass market consumer products from single malt producers that are in a price war down to the bottom because that's where premium blends were 20 years ago
Yep.
is where the
Yep.
entry-level single malts are now. But then you've got, at the other end of the spectrum, you've got Macallans and Ardbegs and whatnot selling for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds. And it's about trying to position your brand in the right place and trying to understand what you're able to do with your margin structures.
Is this where you maybe talk about the winification of the whiskey industry, where
Totally.
you've got this race to the bottom at one end and a race to the top at the other?
Absolutely is, and I think that it's I think it's a good thing. Honestly, you talked about whiskey being classless, and I think that's where it comes in. People are able to get single malts,
Yeah.
and if you're in Bangalore, you can't get that.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You know, can't just go. I couldn't get a
Scotland.
supermarket dram out of the liquor
Aye.
store down the road because it's too. But I mean, on that front, you mentioned like the blends, and this is probably one of the most technical we've been for a long time.
No,
When we
we're
talk-
getting technical, but
sorry.
No, it's great. But
Absolutely fucked it.
But no, but when you talk about like you talk about what happened in the history shows us what happened with the blends, and you say it. But then what a lot of people will say is that the big blenders or the companies and it would be interesting to hear from your perspective now as a blender, you look at that and say, right, when Famous Grouse or Bell's or White and Mackay, which were big household whiskies that were so affordable, but
Still are.
yeah, exactly. But
Remember,
at the same time, a lot of people would argue that the level of quality has dropped considerably in what they're producing.
People love to do that though.
But is it true?
Right.
I would argue.
What's the question? 'Cause
Well,
I
is it
think-
true? Is this a myth, or have
the
it?
whiskey's
'Cause-
getting worse.
or is it a case? Because some might argue that, let's just say Edrington, for example, a previous employer of yours, they might say,
Love you guys.
Yeah, sponsorship is available. But they might say, they might look at that and say, we've got these great casks here that would normally be ring fenced to go into a blended product, but at the same time, through the boom of single malt, they might look at that and go, however, keep hold of them for another 10 years and these will go through the roof as a single malt product, which means that we can take the younger stuff, or not so much the younger stuff, because it's, younger doesn't often mean worse, but the less quality of cask can be ring fenced because it can be balanced out with single grain whiskey.
It's a great question, and I think I'll come at it from two angles, because I've been really fortunate over the last couple of years to be speaking quite closely with some of the blending team at Edrington, and Famous Grouse. Let's use that as the example, right? The stock quality that goes into Famous Grouse is unfucking believable. If I could get my hands on that stock, then I would be the happiest guy in my position. The levels of scrutiny and the levels of quality checks and the levels of sensory, and they go through over 1,000 checkpoints to be able to put out a product. They do deep dive studies on ideas that you think will either benefit or hinder quality, to understand what the effect is going to be on that product. I think that these blends, which is very easy to say, well, they've been they've become homogenized, or they have X, Y, and Z. I don't think that's true.
Right. Okay.
I think that the flavor profile has changed, which is a different thing, and it's moved from being a more malt centric product to a grain centric product. And I think that that's the economy piece, and that's the perception piece where people say,
well, then it must be.
Yeah, more grain equals worse whiskey. And I would absolutely defend that to the hilt.
Totally.
Because I think that good quality grain, if it's put, it doesn't need to be the best wood. You don't have to have first fills, but if you put good quality grain into a refill bourbon, within 7 years, you're going to have an outstanding product.
I think what's interesting is we now have a far more consistent product in that blended market.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that perhaps a group like us will fantasize, even when talking blends specifically, when you get your Ballantines 1980s, your Ballantines 1970s, it is romantic, but there is a higher malt content because malt whiskey wasn't selling as much. This product is now more consistent and as affordable, really, with the time and with.
And then I suppose,
the
like you
economy.
say, when you
It
talk
is-
about races to the top and races to the bottom, you know, if you're an Edrington that can have on one side of the scale a brand like the Macallan, and then at the other side another brand like which is a much more affordable, and it fascinates me, the marketing. I mean, you go all the way back through history, and we've talked about this on the podcast before as well. With Danny Dyer and the sort of weird situation.
Danny Dyer from Grant.
From
Danny
Grant.
Dyer from EastEnders.
Global Grants, not you slag.
but we talked about the situation where, you know, at a time when Grant's was one of the most sought after blended whiskies in the world, the William Grant and Sons family decided to put an advertising campaign out for another brand that they owned called Glenfiddich, which said, "You'll never stand for a blend again." And it's like, on one side of the scale, they're saying
They're punching themselves.
They literally are saying, but what they were able to do is create a sort of divide in the marketplace to say, we can push this towards the Grant's blend can go towards your standard whiskey drinker. We can then push this product
as a premium
to the
product.
premium drinker.
I would put it to you that the blended Scotch drinker is a more loyal brand drinker than a single malt drinker.
And I think that although there is a lot of industry people listening, people probably don't realise how many distilleries. I mean, we're talking easily. Probably 80% of the industry distilleries wouldn't be open if it wasn't for the blends that came in the moment. It's ridiculous how important they are now.
We've talked about Rosebank and all these different ones.
I think it's very cool to say, well, it was better 20 years ago. Even if you stay with Edrington and move to their malts, something like Highland Park, people will say, I'm Highland Park 12, but you should have had it in the early 2000s. And the reason people romanticise that is because the stock management is now good, and they now are able to have consistent products. Their 12-year-old might have had 15, 16-year-old whiskey in it in the 2000s, but that wasn't because, you know, that was how it was intended. It was because that's kind of what they had, and that's what they done, and that was a different time.
Just stock management has changed so much in the last 30 years. I mean, massively. And think about the quantity of stock that these big giants have. You know, we're talking hundreds of thousands, definitely millions of casks each. Now, they're able to draw from that inventory. They can achieve a higher margin if they sell every cask as a branded Macallan or a branded Talisker or a branded whatever it is. But they're able, you know, they're very clever people working in a very, very old industry with a lot of knowledge behind them. And so they know how to manage this stock. They know how to keep it and what they're going to use it for. A cask will be earmarked, not at day one, but definitely at year 3 or 5, into what it's going to be going into, if it's going to be going into blend X or if it's going to be going into single malt Y, whatever it is. And so it's cultivated for that. And I think that the level of complexity is absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, we as Woven, we're at the very opposite end of the spectrum. So, you know, we hand select casks pretty much. We take small parcels.
Sorry to interrupt. Let's go to the stage.
Let's
go before we. So you've come back. You've left Edrington,
and then I went to Atom Drams, which is part and master of Malt. As their independent bottler, boutique whiskey, as well as a couple of gin brands and then also the master of malt bottlings. And I was working in the US, so I was doing a lot of integration into the USA and the sales and marketing sides of that. And that's where Duncan and Nick, who are my two co-founders of Woven, we'd known each other for a long time. Duncan and I had met at the bars back in the early 2000s working. He wore trilby and had long hair. He'll hate that. But he was the cool guy, you know. And then Nick had moved over from New Zealand, so he's a Kiwi. But he was also working in bars, although I didn't know him then. And I'd met him actually when I was working at Innocent Gun, because he was importing Innocent Gun into Norway when he was over there.
Wow.
It's a strange... I mean, this industry, you guys know it. This industry is small. It's built out of a rising tide lifts all ships, and everybody kind of knows each other and is able to have that sort of like that 1 degree of separation.
Yeah.
So we'd known each other for a long time, and then we started working together at Atom Brands, and Nick had brought us in, me in the US, Duncan in marketing, and we had been discussing, business ideas, as you will idly. And I stupidly went on a trip to Canada. Flight got cancelled. Was sitting in Toronto airport for I think 36 hours, and I downloaded sort of Fisher Price, My First Business Plan. You fill out an Excel spreadsheet, and suddenly you've got a profitable business. And
I think we did that for podcasts.
All we have to do is this.
Yeah.
And it will be profitable within 5 minutes.
So it was your idea then?
And
it was all of our idea, definitely.
Yeah.
But
where did you get the itch for getting involved in production, considering you spent so much time in sales?
That's interesting.
yeah, that's a really good question. When we started the business, we essentially put in our own money. So we had enough money to buy about 1,100 bottles worth of whiskey, 50 CLs, so about 600 litres worth of whiskey. We had a little bit of money to do the branding, buy the bottles, but we didn't have any money to employ anybody, let alone get somebody with technical know-how.
And when you started, was this a quit your job and start, or was it let's do this alongside and see how it goes?
It was an interesting time.
Was it a full commitment?
It was 2020, 2021.
Oh, right. Okay.
So there was a bit of furlough involved, and that gave me and Duncan the headspace and ability to be able to properly put this together. Duncan markets it, and so he's the brainchild behind the brand and around the messaging and around the bottle and around the why, right? We have Nick, who is the managing director, and he also does the sales, and so he's very much the business drive behind it. And I suppose that at that start point, I was the one that would just try and get everything done. And so in terms of the blending, it was a case of, we have a small parcel of stock. We're going to try and put it together. So we drew samples from the 6 casks. We had a couple of hoggies. We had a little quart cask and a few octaves that we bought from a previous employer, which is great. They gave us sort of your first blending set.
And then it's your job to make your...
And it was my job to try and blend them together. So
now, when you were first blending, was it a case of you had an end product in mind and you sourced the whiskey to achieve that, or was it we've got these casks? What can we make with it?
Yeah, so the first blends, which we did 4 whiskies, it was the second.
Yeah.
So we received this parcel that was essentially remnants from independent bottlings, right? So if you're a customer in Taiwan and you want 200 bottles of this fantastic, whatever it is, Campbelltown blended malt 5-year-old in an octave, then that will take up 3.2 octaves worth of stock. Right. But then they've got a little bit left over. Yeah. And so we were able to sort of hoover up some of these remnants, and that gave us our first blending stock.
Wow.
But it was a good spread. I need to shout out and really thank Sam Simmons for helping us out with that first parcel, because he was the brains behind sort of what they would be and how they could not how they could go together, but like you'll need some aged grain, you'll need some workhorse grain, a Garvin 8-year-old. You'll want something a little bit peated, so they we got Kulila. You'll want something that's juicy, so we had some Ben Rinnis and I can't remember what else was in there.
Well, I think if people are listening, they don't know the brand. What people will be amazed by, and something that I was just about to kind of interject, is you're the most transparent new whiskey brand that I've ever come across. And when Woven started, I was still in the on-trade, and I remember your first 4 releases, because one was a very small release of about 100 bottles.
We had one that was 32 bottles.
32,
really?
That was it. And I knew like 3 people who had one.
I don't have one. I'll tell you that.
And so, you've done the 4 releases, and you go on the Woven website, and you would have these great kind of flavour graphs.
Yeah.
That would also include details about the stock. Now, we are kind of an audience, we've been speaking about how, again, people's attitude on whiskey now, and we've been drawn towards independent bottlers and bespoke products and one-off products.
Yeah.
And this was a new brand. First and foremost, we see the bottles.
Well, they're not that transparent, are they? They're kind of frosted glass.
Brown frosted glass.
For people that are audio listeners and not watching the video, it's kind of, brown frosted glass, 50 cl, Woven, the name. Where did the name come from? It just, everything was thought-provoking. It was an Edinburgh brand, and it was a Leith blender, which is ding, 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 ding,
Everything
ding.
that's hip and trendy, right?
It really does. It gets you going, what is this? Oh, and my local bar's got it on their back bar. Oh, let me try all four.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that for all new releases, I think what is amazing is really you got the whiskey industry on side quite early.
I mean, that was really important for us when we started having conversations about starting a whiskey business and then trying to source whiskies. We got a lot of rejections because they said, "Oh, you're a whiskey investment company. You must be
Right."
because you've got no pedigree. You're three guys trying to do something, and they'd seen it before, right?
Yeah.
And so they'd actually seen people coming to them saying, "No, we're blenders, buying casks and then flipping them, and all this malarkey, fun times." But we had a really clear idea about what we wanted because look. Us a lot in this room, right? Where in our mid-30s, well, I'm late 30s now, actually. Was mid-30s.
Mid to late.
Yeah. I studied, I studied art at university. Duncan did philosophy and design, and Nick's travelled the world and done everything. But our friend group is never... We don't drink out in the Highlands with a fucking... deer on the label and in a bothy with a roaring fire. We're with our friends. We're drinking good whiskey, eating amazing food made by our friends who are chefs, wearing the fucking clothes that our pals make as well, and doing all this type of stuff. And so we wanted to create a brand that spoke to us as contemporary drinkers.
Yeah. Away from the shortbread tin.
Away from the shortbread tin, exactly.
Following flavour as well. You had a big thing of different flavours.
All of our whiskies are based around flavour, right? So, when I'm blending, I don't look at the names, I don't look at the ages, I don't look at whether it's a grain or a malt. I try and put together blind as much as possible. And I work through a grid system that's quite useful for me, which is trying to pair up combinations and work through those pairs to pair up more. But the brand and the ethos was all about trying to give minimalism aesthetics, but maximal information. So that's where, if you go onto the website, then you will see essays on each whiskey, how we made it, why we made it, what casks we used, where we traveled to go and get them, who we met, the people behind it, as much information as we possibly can, where we can. We're not allowed to name a lot of the whiskies because of naming rights. You're able to afford a little bit more if the naming rights cost for a whiskey. So if we don't get the naming rights, then we're saving a bit of cash as well.
And when it comes to the decision, then was it always going to be let's be a blender, or was there a discussion about, because when you look at independent bottlers, there's a lot of independent bottlers out there. We've got the tasting for Woody's.
Well, with Woodrow's, it's a great example because
tasting
they are an independent bottler, but they have a blended whiskey.
And then you look at you look at Whiskey Row, which is rare find Whiskey Row, and these guys as well. But was it always the intention? Did you say set out the stall early? Because you're talking about buying this parcel, it seemed to be like a sort of ready to go blending kit, effectively. Of whiskey. Was it always going to be blends, or was there a discussion about being
the first business plan was I've still got it and it's fucking amazing. Campbelltown, there was a garage, like a mechanic's garage, just behind Springbank. Had been deserted for about 20 years, and I was like, I can get that. I can get that and make a little skunkworks distillery in Campbelltown that's going to be like the most experimental, all this and everything, and budgeted $200,000 for it. Whoop. trust me, guys. If we do this, like we don't need much investment. We can do this, and then and then we'll blend in order to be able to subsidize the cash, and that's going to be great. And of course, Nick, who's got a business brain that I will never have, you know, he looked on that and went, horseshit. That's never happening.
Yeah.
And Duncan came out with something I thought was amazing, that about 10 years previously, he had actually built a presentation, sort of properly PowerPoint 1.0, that was around a blending house in Leith and bringing blending back to Leith.
Yep.
He's still got the presentation on it, and it's genius. He really is a genius. And so we started to think, well, blending, that could be it. Let's deep dive into that. And a real aha moment, like, you know, those moments where you go, fuck, that's a real thing. It just so happened we were watching a podcast with Arthur from Royal Mile. Hey, Arthur. And John Glazer from Compass Box.
Right.
2020. They were 2021. They were celebrating their 20th year. And we went, what?
Yeah.
They're the young upstarts that are making waves in the whiskey industry.
When you first had hedonism, you were like, a blended grain.
Exactly.
How forward thinking. And it was forward thinking.
Absolutely amazing. And
they've established it, yeah.
They're an amazing company. I love them so much. But we were shocked that they were the contemporary blender.
Yeah.
And we looked around and there wasn't anybody else.
Really?
Yeah. Not really.
So it's just, I mean, it is a fascinating sort of conversation to have when you're looking at a business model, because it's a brave decision. Because
stupid decision.
When you look at sometimes when you look at a business, you can say, "Wow, there's the gap," because there's nobody else doing it. But then you also go, "Well, hang on a minute here."
We had a lot of faith in blending.
Yeah.
Look, blending, when you break it down, blending is the most amazing thing to do, because you're able to be as curious as you want to be on a table, right? When you're a distiller, you have to know a lot about yeast.
Yep.
You have to have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the range in which you're able to be experimental means that you're spending somebody's money, you're spending a lot of time, and you're taking a fucking big gamble.
Yeah.
I'm able to do that gamble 20 times a day on a table.
That's brilliant, yeah.
By bringing in distillery X or Y and seeing what they're like together, bringing something from a different part of the world, you know, where we've built out this mentality and philosophy that every great whiskey drinking country is now a fantastic whiskey making country.
Right.
And so being able to add more dimensions into blending through new countries, new techniques, new styles, new thinking has meant that we can be truly experimental with what we do. And the consequences are that, you know, it might taste shit on a table.
Well, that's it,
that goes away.
It's just milliliters of whiskey that you're playing around with. But then it's just, once you get that right balance, I suppose it's just the mathematics of being able to add the right volumes together.
And I think when you frame blending up in that context, like, where are the limits? I don't know.
And so I think you've kind of pushed the limits in a way that we could admire. We're talking about world whiskey as well. And so I think this is something that we should talk about, because people might not know about the brand. But could you talk about some of the stock you've used? I know, for example, we've done a partnership between Bevy and Woven previously called Thrice. And we used some Manuka honey smoked New Zealand malt whiskey.
Well, not Manuka honey smoked, right? So Manuka get this, right?
Because it was really it was
absolutely fantastic distillery, husband and wife team, Thompson Distillery, outside of Auckland. But the Manuka tree, it's more like a gorse bush than it is a tree. Let's be frank. It's not like a towering oak. It's a fucking gorse bush. But
I didn't realize you got so angry about that.
I didn't get angry. I was just
it's a fucking gorse bush.
Well, it's not. It's a
tree.
It's went over all our heats.
But it creates a blossom, right?
Right. Okay.
A beautiful pungent blossom. The bees come and collect the nectar, and then they make the Manuka honey, which is a cure-all honey from New Zealand. Very expensive. You'll know.
Oh yeah,
M&S boy.
M&S boy. Yeah, £20 for a bottle.
That's what you spend on your crumpet in the morning.
Exactly. Butler spreads it for me.
But the wood itself is very dense and very resinous, and so when it burns, it creates almost like an incense-like burn. And so they dry their malt with a smokeless fuel and then do a short, sharp burst of Manuka smoke at the end. But what it gives to the malt is it gives really, really clear, distinctive characteristics of clove, orange oil, and smoke, right? And so you have this absolutely very intense. It's turned up to 11. You know, it's not a meek smoke. It's a very, very intense smoke. And what we found was that being able to bring in some Scotch grain or some Irish grain in the case of Thrice, we're able to temper that smoke. We're able to temper those edges and be able to accentuate the sweetness and the sort of the muskeat element of it. Really, really cool. And I think that if I can for it, sorry, I know that
No, carry on.
But I think that within world whiskey, there's 3 types of distiller, right? The first one is the tourist distiller. They will be the most northern, or the highest, or the one that's in Timbuktu. Or I'm sure Timbuktu Distillery is great, by the way. Yeah. But you'll buy a bottle of their whiskey because you've been there.
Yep. Right.
Then you have the second type, which is making Scotch or Irish or American whiskey in their place because they love Scotch, Irish, or whatever it is. You know,
it's a bit like the first Japanese distilleries. They wanted to find the climate in Japan that was closest to Scotland because they thought that would replicate Scotch whiskey as closely as possible. Right?
Able to make great whiskey, exactly. And they're fantastic, but I'm able to explore all of Scotland for its whiskies and Ireland and America. So why would I look to getting something like that? But then there's the third type, which are, you know, if we think about a third, and we're talking about sort of 30% of the distilleries around the world now that are bringing their own philosophy, their own styles, their own techniques, and bringing something different to the table. And they're the ones that you're able to add another dimension into blending.
So Scotland has Campbelltown, and these places have their own funk all over the world, and they're doing that their own thing.
100%. You know, we work with a distillery in Germany called St. Killian, beautiful distillery, really, really interesting. But they have a sort of a line that goes through them, which is funk. Exactly that. It's got this slightly sour, really sort of estery note that comes through, but then it's got a real big bass as well.
And so fascinating for you to work with as a blender. So how can we make this work? Irish grain might be perfect. A Danish malt might work really well.
And I think it's like, when you look at the whiskey industry, there's a way to look at the whiskey industry and say, you know, it's a big marketplace. But then, as we've just discussed, there's people who, well, it's such a big marketplace that has to be broken down into so many different segments as well. Even when you look at like our podcast, when you look at the numbers that we don't have big numbers, but we have a very engaged audience. We have a nice little community. But there's also people who probably like a good whiskey and they like listening to podcasts that probably wouldn't like listening to our whiskey podcast.
Yeah.
Whereas, and it just depends on the areas that you're wanting to try and target. So when you're looking at setting up this business and things like that, are you looking at the big numbers? Are you looking at saying like, well, we sell and get to this level? Or are you saying, let's keep it artisan style and hit the people that we want to hit and give it to the whiskey drinkers that we know will like our product? Because, I mean, first of all, when you look at a marketing side from an outsider looking in, number one, you do a straw poll, as we've already spoken about, and say, would you drink a blend? Well, first of all, actually, you ask a lot of whiskey drinkers, would you drink an independently bottled whiskey? And there'll be a lot of guys that go, what's that? I wouldn't if it's not got a label that I recognise on it, I wouldn't drink it. So that's your first thing. Secondly, would you drink a blend? A lot of people would go, nah, no drink a blend. Then thirdly, you're saying like, here's a brand that you have no idea who they are, would you even try that? They don't, by the way, exclusively use Scotch whiskey. Can't be any good there.
If I told you over a year ago,
exactly.
I'm
painting a picture of somebody who I was before.
What was it you said? A sherry slut?
Sherry slut. But I mean,
that's the new
the smoky slut now, by the way.
But this is what we've spoken about. I've seen or read online or in passing heard someone say, why would I spend £50 on a blended whiskey when I can buy a bottle of malt for £25?
Yeah.
Well, it's perception, right?
A year ago, if I gave Graham a whiskey that wasn't from Scotland, he would have already had something
this
against
is a great. So Peter, for yourself, you know, Angus and I are the whiskey novices, right? And basically, what we have been on over the last year, and it's coming up for a year very shortly, actually, is we've been on this incredible journey where we'll actually sit down and have a chat.
You're a real presenter now, Graham. You've been on a journey.
We've been on a journey, and we'll look back and we'll say, look where we were with our whiskey knowledge, whiskey mindset a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and look at where we are now. And, you know, I can remember, you know, kind of not enjoying the amount of independent bottlers at last year's Edinburgh Whisky Festival because I didn't know,
challenging. Yeah,
I didn't know enough about them, and I said, but
how can that be Highland Park if Highland Park have got a
but
stand over
no,
there?
not just that. No, and I understood that bit, but the element was like I don't know. At that time, as a whiskey drinker, I like consistency. So what I know is, I know if I go to a stall at a whiskey festival where there is a distillery there will be a level of consistency versus I could try. Right now, I'm drinking an Aberlour 12 from Woodrow's in Bourbon. Now, I know that I like Aberlour 12, but why would I want to try somebody else's take on Aberlour 12 when I know I like that type of Aberlour 12?
Yeah, and I think we, you know, in times gone by, I would have maybe drawn the wrong conclusion that, well, why would an Aberlour 12 independently bottle be any better than the distillery edition Aberlour 12? Because surely the distillery will just keep all the best casks for themselves.
Correct. And these are
you know whatever the independent bottle has, this is going to be the castaways.
And these are the conceptions that we've come to. So for me, it's interesting, you know, from a business perspective, to have such a trust in a market that you can say to yourself, we will go there into an area that. And maybe it's just naive for myself to think how many whiskey drinkers are going to look at that and go, I want that.
There's a couple of things then. I think what you've said is really interesting because we did get a lot of acceptance from the whiskey industry.
Yes.
Yep.
And I think it's because we were transparent. No, actually, I think it's more than that. I think it's because we are very open about who we are and why we're doing it, and that we want to be a part of the whiskey industry. We want to add to that story. I think that my issue with independent bottlers, and this isn't an issue with independent bottlers. I think that's probably not the right terminology, but I feel like it's got a ceiling to it.
Yeah.
You're only able to do what you're able to buy, right? And not much more. You can re-rack, great. You can do some interesting things around branding, great. But you're still playing with that name, that distillery, and that age.
That's still what's selling it.
If you have that name.
Exactly. But with blending, what we're able to do is we're able to focus on flavor, and you know, we use a word. Well, I'll go into it a little bit more if that's okay, which is about how we blend and what we do and what we look for. But you know, we blend towards one word, which is yummy, right? It's a fucking silly word, right?
Very good.
But objectively, that Aberlour and that, what were you having?
It was Edgedowery.
And that, oh God, similar names. One of them you would find more yummy than the other, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Just, it might be the time of day, it might be how you're feeling, it might be whatever, but we try and blend towards yummy. And in terms of what we do with our outward messaging and how we grow, is we want to recruit in. We want to bring people into this industry. This world that we're in is amazing and geeky and fun and all this sort of stuff, but we have a bottle that brings people in. We have a brand message that brings people in. We do a lot of work in terms of building a community, and building that community that isn't from the whiskey industry, but bringing in adjacent, from coffee, from fashion, from food, from wine, from architecture, from design. That's where we're bringing in to Woven. Do they care about it being a blend? No. Do they want to know that this plus this makes something really fucking yummy in your glass? Yeah, they do. And they want to know about that. Think about third wave coffee, right?
Yep.
Sorry. Sorry. Oh, I went full lecture. That was bad. Think about third wave coffee or new wave wine.
Yeah.
Right? We might not be experts in it. I'm certainly not. But I'm an avid amateur.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there going, oh, I really like washed Colombian, geisha bean. If I do a V60 in the morning, that tastes amazing, but it's not good as a mocha mass. You're able to go further into it. And wine, fuck, you get excited about learning about it, and that's who we want to bring into our world as Woven.
Yeah,
it's not about getting the acceptance and the love of the whiskey industry. We hope that we can. We want that. And for the first couple of years, it was about trying to get those blue tick moments. Mm-hmm. We want Charlie McLean. We want Dave Broom. We want... I love you all, but we want all the good guys.
You want the Whiskey Stories podcast
to be exactly. We this is really key for us to be able to reach. It's a small but really noisy and really influential community, but that isn't our aim. When you said, "Are you ambitious?"
Yeah. Well, not are you ambitious?
No,
I know you're ambitious, but is the plan? Was the plan to go? What you could do?
What's the limit?
Is to go. Let's make a product that's massively scalable.
Yes,
that could be done.
It's an easy answer.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
But we want to be a brand and a whiskey that adds to the story of whiskey, right?
Yeah.
There's no fucking point in doing this industry if you're coming in as an also-ran.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All the whiskey you've done so far have been, all the bottlings you've done have been called experiences.
Yeah.
And so why have you done that?
So we think that it's a great question, and there's layers to the answer. So
I feel like Duncan would want me to answer this.
Yeah.
Want me to ask it.
Yeah.
So
we came up with a brand message at the beginning. So Woven, obviously, I'm not going to weave is to bring strands together to make a fabric.
Sure.
And that's what we're doing with whiskies. We're bringing strands of whiskey from different parts of the world or different flavor profiles and putting them together into one fabric, one whiskey. And we thought about how we experience whiskey. And you do it in groups. You have it alone. Every time you drink, you can drink the same whiskey in 10 different spaces and 10 different times in your life, and you're going to have a different experience.
For sure.
And when we were developing our limited edition range, which we call our experiences, so our core range aren't experiences, but our limited editions are, we come up with that they're more conceptual. So we blend them around a thought, a memory, a philosophy, a feeling, a place, something that I'm able as a blender to lock into and then be able to blend towards. So we've done whiskies that have been called modern nostalgia, that sort of, we're in the digger's arms. You come in here at 1 p.m. when you still got the faint smell of wood polish, and you have the little bit of stale beer, but then you also have the wood as well. We made a whiskey that tastes like that. It's fucking banging. We made a whiskey called Joy in Nature that was from my walks along the East Coast, where it's between the sea and the forest, and you have the pine fresh. We also have the minerality of the sea. Right. We've made ones called Synchronicity that was much more about trying to capture juicy fruit and dry smoke together. Thrice was about the ritual of 3 sips, and that third sip being the perfect moment when you sip. These are all experiences.
It's storytelling, isn't it?
Well, that's it. I mean, I think when you're right. You go all the way back and you talk about the gentleman in Lebanon that you met, and it's like we see it so many times. We talk about it all the time on the podcast. Whiskey is about sharing. Whiskey's no good buying a £150, £200, £3,000, whatever it is, bottle, and sitting there and going, I don't want to give this to anybody because it's good whiskey and I don't want anybody else to have it. What you actually tend to find, and it was like, you know, even when we were at Whisky Fringe and stuff like that, is, you know, it's been a real eye opener for Angus and I, we're now dancing around the edges of the industry.
Yeah.
And
Mate, you're the epicenter of it.
well, I didn't want to say.
Don't tell him that.
We're still waiting on our Quake.
The
but
celebs.
we'll be the first whiskey
I once
podcast
accidentally told him about the keepers of the Quake, and they
Dancing around the rim of the Quake.
we're nearly there. But the point is that, you know, you go to something like the Whisky Fringe, and you know about the halftime orange, and you also know when you go to a couple of these places now, these things is that when you speak to people in the industry, the bottle's under the table.
Yeah.
And you know what was
that a good thing?
Well,
I'll come back to that.
It is. It's an interesting thing. But what I would say is that the generosity of that was incredible.
Yeah.
You know, we never felt we were offered more whiskey oranges than your average person that was at the people that were paying to go.
Yeah.
We were very grateful. It was a fantastic place to be and experience. But I think there was also a lot of towards the last hour, maybe the last 45 minutes of the.
Do you remember it?
Whisky Fringe, vaguely. I'm going to try and deliver a tasting to Ross in a minute, actually. But what you tend to find is that there was a lot of people that were like, we've got all this stock left that was to be used for our halftime orange. So it was literally, they were saying, here, take a bit more, have a bit more, because I don't want to take it home with me. And you look at some of the whiskies that were there, and you're saying that rather than going, right, that's the result, we only got rid of half that bottle, we can keep that other half for another time. It was like, no, let's just get rid of it, let's let people enjoy it, and let's give it to
And when
people.
you're drinking whiskey, it's about when you had it. It's the story that you could retell when you tasted it, who you were with, and that's why I think it's really interesting that you're doing storytelling in the conception of your whiskies, and then people are going to try it with their friend for a birthday, whatever. And so it's a real different way of looking at whiskey and making whiskey.
It comes. All of this ties into what we are in as a collective, which is the hospitality industry, right?
Yeah.
The whiskey brands are a distilled version of the hospitality industry, but that word hospitality is what we take really, really seriously with Woven, because we try and give people the best experience that they can, but we learnt that working in bars.
Yeah, true.
You know?
It's a well-trodden path. I mean, how many people we've had on this podcast that have started exactly the same way as yourself, and it is the well-trodden path of somebody getting into the industry, of basically starting out, and the job not just becoming a job, and it actually being something. You mentioned about stick and jam, and what was the drink you were saying?
Jam and a daiquiri.
But basically, as you say, it's where you learn the balance of flavour profile, and people, there'll be for every one of you, there'll be maybe 10, 20, 30, 100 people who've gone, this is just a job to get me through uni, I don't care whether it's a pint of lager or whether it's this, and I know how to make, or from the list in front of me, I know how to make this and scoop it all in and shake it, and that's your. Whereas there's the old person who comes through that starts to take a real keen interest in, wait a minute, if you like that, do you think you'd like this? Now, you've mentioned hospitality. I would say experience, and you also mentioned experience there. The experience is incredible. If you can give somebody you go to whiskey tastings and get the experience that you have, where it's not just somebody sitting there going, try that, this is what you should. Because I think we're saying, I've been to more whiskey tasting in the last year than I've ever been to before. We're going to be delivering a whiskey tasting, live podcast recording whiskey tasting next week. But I would say that now we're starting to see in these whiskey tastings people going for the experience rather than this is what you should get, this is how you should taste it, this is how you should drink it.
I think you can build a lot around what's in the glass, and the glass as well, you know. I mean, make it an experience. Make it when you go to a beautiful coffee shop and they come over with the little tray and the beautiful ceramic cup, and you have a little card that comes with it, then you feel really like you might be paying an arm and a leg for it, 20 quid for a cup of coffee, what the hell? But you feel like you're buying that experience. And I think that it's really important as a contemporary brand to be able to understand that and be able to study it, and then to be able to go into it as far as you can. And I think that's something that Woven have done quite well today, and it's something that we're trying to push a lot more as well.
It's something we've mentioned so many times in the podcast. when it's just you, Duncan and Nick, there's
Yeah.
only so much you can do when you're starting to release product. But if you do get it on that back bar, and we've said, an enthusiastic bartender is the best brand ambassador any brand could have. You get somewhere like Uno Mas at the top of Leaf Walk, who bought all these wovens in, and certainly educated me on the brand, and maybe 300 other people that came in and said, what the hell's that bottle? I've never seen it before. And that's how important the on-trade can be for a big established brand and for a new brand.
100%.
Although, it feels to me this is almost like a second phase now for Woven. Your team's just got quite a lot bigger.
Yep. So, gone are the days of solo bottling and labeling and all that sort of stuff. So now we've just taken on Lara, who's our brand ambassador. Absolutely amazing. She spent the last year in India. She was working on the Pernod Ricard graduate program. So she's come in as our BA and is going to be a really great face within the whiskey community. So do make sure that you catch up with her because she's cool as fuck. We've got Izzy, who's our brand manager, who's come in from a great whiskey distillery, sort of new wave whiskey distillery. Kieran Russell, who was for a long time at Sipsmiths working on product development, he's come into ops manager role. Got finance director, we've got head of digital. Yeah, so
Fantastic.
We're growing out the team, and it's that real chapter 2 moment. You know, it's a big gamble.
Yeah.
Big gamble, and a lot of investment has gone into people. But this is our ambition. We've got we sometimes reference sort of the Victorian mentality of ambition. There was no shame in it then.
No.
Like, yes, we are in terms of blenders, we are the smallest of the small, right? That's fine, but we don't want to be.
No.
Yeah.
We want to get to that size and that scale where we're employing techniques and taking on really, really amazing technology to be able to scale and be able to make the best quality whiskey that uses processes that you would never associate with whiskey, but brings it in to make it better.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really, really exciting next journey for us.
yes, right.
We've been in that startup phase for the last 3 years and felt every second of it. Being a whiskey company without any money or any whiskey is quite tough.
Still got a full head of hair.
Well, the thing is as well, we've talked about this with the new distilleries that are creeping in, and I've said it is the time to be a whiskey drinker because there's so much excitement around. We talked a bit about cost, you're right, the price and things like that is difficult, but when you look at how many new distilleries are trying new things, you've got so many independent bottlers, and then you've got people like yourselves as well who are starting to grow. But at the same time, from your own perspective, you're entering an industry that is full of industry giants that are hundreds of years old. And that's where I can imagine the dauntingness of it, because when you look at an established, what you talked about Compass Box, and you're saying they've been around for 20 years. Now 20 years for us is a large chunk of our life. But then you look at all the other industry giants, and you're talking about building this little distillery around the back of Springbank. You're suddenly saying,
it's never going to happen.
No, but you suddenly look at you. But it's hard to emulate in that when you're such an entry, when you're coming in at such an early stage. You're entering a hundreds of years old industry with some of the biggest brands you look at, and I can imagine you're right with this sort of like, we want to be as big as we can possibly get. If someone looks at, we're a blender, we're small just now, we've just started out, we're 3 years old.
It's not about being as big as we can, it's about bringing as many people in as we can. I think that's more important. I'm not too worried about, obviously, yes, sales or whatever are very important, but it's not about it. It's definitely not
Carry on.
building the biggest community that we possibly can, that vibe on what we're doing and engage with it and get excited is the most exciting thing that I can possibly imagine within whiskey.
Yeah.
And one aspect when Graham was talking about how it's never been it's a great time to be a whiskey drinker is the proliferation of, you touched on it earlier, distilled world whiskey. So, and that's something that's so interesting because we've had a lot of people from within the Scotch industry world, and you're limited there. We're an independent bottler, and maybe we do have a bourbon and we do have a Japanese whiskey, but ultimately it's mostly Scotch whiskey.
Yeah.
Whereas for yourselves, there really seems to be a focus on, no, we're going to bring in, these distilleries from, Germany, from Finland, from Norway.
And that works for everybody, because you'll actually maybe be the introduction of those distilleries to people here in the UK.
Exactly.
I had maybe one Thompson New Zealand release before, but I don't think I'd ever had a conversation about it.
Yeah, and I remember looking at this. I can't remember exactly, but Germany produces a huge volume of whiskey.
Oh, yeah.
A real huge volume of whiskey, and that's something a lot of people won't realise.
They're making grain as well. It's not just malt. Or I went to a beautiful distillery last month called Kura Distillery in Finland, or Cairo, as a lot of us call it. But I was corrected when I was there.
That's good to know. It's Finnish rye.
Yeah, Finnish rye, right? A small little rye. So a very, very cold climate. So it only grows for a short period of the year. But it's what they grow up with. So they make rye porridge. That's what all the Finnish kids grow up on. That's why they're angry. And then that moves into rye bread. Their staple grain is rye.
Yeah.
And when they were drinking rye whiskey from America, it was sweet and spicy. That's not like what they were eating.
Yeah.
They wanted to make a rye whiskey that spoke to their flavor profile from them. And so they fucking did it.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful and amazing. And I think that that there's interesting stories and interesting people around the world that are making beautiful things. And we want to be able to, we have layers. We've got layers. But one of our missions is to be able to be a mouthpiece, be a speaker for these guys. And
you're not, and it's limitless when you use global whiskey. I mean, remind me the name of the Manuka. What was the Manuka?
Thompson.
But what was the blend that your product?
It's called Hemispheres.
That was what I had at the Whisky Fringe, and I don't know if we did it on camera. Well, it was one of these ones where basically what was happening was we were based outside. It was a lovely sunny afternoon, and we were taking it in turns to just run in, come back with 3 glasses of something, and then pass it around. Often it was 3 glasses of something different. And I think it was the Hemisphere that I'd come back with. Didn't tell anybody, and it amazing. Like
or the time I came back with a single glass of something, you took half of it, and Vicky took the rest. But I was left with, I haven't even tried that.
You can smell it. That's it.
Were you at Whisky Fringe this year? Were Woven at Whisky Fringe?
Yeah, so we were for the first time.
I was going to say, because I think we seen you in the same venue earlier this year
at Drinkmonger.
At a spirit festival. It was against Royal Mile Whiskies trying something a bit different.
And we'd been out the night before.
Had we?
And ended up very worse for wear. Extremely worse for wear. And I actually spoke to yourself, or maybe it was one of your colleagues. And to be honest, I have to apologise. I was in very little chat at all at Spirits Festival. But then I did say, give me, and I can't remember which one you gave me, but I basically said, I'm on a really bad hangover. Give me something that's a whiskey that's going to sort of help that out. And I can't remember what it was, but again, a completely different flavour to what you're expecting. And I think that's what really excites me about what you do is, number one, the flavour profiles. And when you hear you speaking about how you're putting it together through flavour, not through what you're drinking, it's all blind. But number two, when you actually look at when you drink it and you go, that is bloody good, what have you done with that? And you're saying, oh, well, this is Manuka wood from a distillery in New Zealand, and it's mixed with, and you go through all the different things, and you're talking about Finnish rye, and you're talking about all these different things. It's limitless for you, because you're not limited yourself to saying we only use Scotch single malt, we only use Scottish produce, we use so many different things.
Even within Scotland, you're almost limitless.
Yeah.
I mean,
blending is the next huge thing, and I'm not talking about these big brands. I'm talking about being able to say, I've made this because it tastes fucking great.
Yeah.
Right? And I've put this together, and I've taken a distillery from...
wherever.
Yeah, exactly. I was actually going
About two.
somebody's got stage fright. But if you think about Scotland, then you've got all these amazing distilleries making fantastic things, and they really, really are. And when we're able to bring in wood, you're able to bring in new aging techniques, you're able to bring in re-racking, finishing, slow proofing, whatever it might be, in order to enhance it. And look, we've got, I blend around 3 principles only, okay? The first one is that flavour follows texture. So I try to blend the texture first, right? A whiskey should not be insipid. It should not be watery. It shouldn't be too sharp. You want it to have a really beautiful glycerol feeling in the mouth. So I always try and blend the texture first. The second one is clarity. Now, if you think about when you're sipping a whiskey, it comes up and it peaks and then comes back down again. That moment at its peak, I want that to be 1 or 2 words that all 3 of you can agree on.
Okay.
That's what a clarity is. And then the third piece is balance, right? Because a whiskey should be a balance of flavors, and you shouldn't taste... If I'm making a blend of 7 whiskeys, I don't want you to taste
one of them.
Yeah, and I also don't want you to taste fucking competing things in a glass. I want you to taste one whiskey that you're then able to think about and go, oh, actually, see that Isla single malt, that's what that gives. Or see what that grain does, that gives this, if you want.
And so something that you hinted at, I'm not sure if you're able to talk about it or not, core range.
Yeah.
So that's something we're about to see.
So it's been out for a while in 50 CL bottles, but we're just about to launch our 70 CLs for the first time. So we've been through a journey.
We've all been through a journey.
We've been through a journey of getting a 70 CL bottle. We love our bottles. They're called a Boston Round. They're a pharmaceutical bottle, the most common bottle in the world. And we wanted
top as well, which we like.
Yeah, we wanted to keep all of those cues. So it's a very similar looking bottle. You're not going to see much difference.
It's going to be slightly bigger.
Slightly bigger.
And
but,
is that taller or fatter?
It's actually both.
Right,
it's
so tiny wee bit.
It's literally scaled out.
Yeah, so it will be probably very difficult to actually notice.
Yeah, it doesn't look much different. You still think it's a little bottle on the shelf, and that's good. We want it to be.
Yeah, good.
But it is 70 CL. But we've got 3 products in our home range. In our core range, we've got Homemade, which is a combination of 2 single malts from Speyside and a lowland grain into sherry and portwood, and is sort of has that gloopiness that you want from a sort of traditional Scottish blend, but it's also got a little bit of grime and loveliness and grit coming into it, which just makes it pop. We've then got Super Blend, which is taking whiskies from around the world. So we've got spice and sweetness from America. We've got creaminess from Ireland. We've got a whole load of sort of apple orchard fruit coming in from Scotland as well.
I love Super Blend.
Yeah, man, it's class. Some German single malt and some English single malt as well. And actually in the next batch, a little bit Japanese too. And then we've got Hemispheres, which is the 2-part blend of Thompson single malt Manuka smoked whiskey from New Zealand, and a single grain from Scotland, one of New Zealand's smallest distilleries and one of Scotland's biggest distilleries.
Right.
But the 3 of them work really well because you're exploring smoke without being peat. You're looking at a global application of whiskies and how they can come together, and then you're looking at a single origin product from Scotland that's made with a lot of love and a lot of passion, and
So presumably with this core range, this is something you want to produce or keep producing for a long time.
And scaling.
And scale it. So, I mean, the recipe presumably will at some point have to change at different, availability of things.
We do them in
relationships,
batches.
isn't it?
Yeah, we do them in batches. We've got good purchasing relationships with a lot of large suppliers in order to to scale these over the next 5 to 8 years. So we've got sort of that mapped out, and agreements in place that say, yeah, sure, in 8 years' time you can buy that silly amount of whiskey if you go according to plan. But
Whiskey futures.
yeah, absolutely. But you know, it's an interesting thing from a business point of view, trying to build these relationships, because it is relationship.
Yeah.
You know, the gatekeepers, the big gatekeepers in this industry are lovely people.
Yeah.
Right? That's the big secret here, is that they're really good people and they want to support you.
Yeah.
You're a small business trying to do a good thing. Yeah, they're going to be on your side where they can.
Yeah.
Right? If they can't, they're going to tell you straight out, I can't do it. Right. Fine. But they want to help you.
It's always been such a fascinating conversation that we've had with independent bottlers and other people in the industry. It's like, we've talked about the phrase like sharp elbows in the industry. There's very little.
Very few.
Yeah, and I think the fascinating part for me is I did a deep dive into independent bottlers during lockdown, because I was going, I don't understand how this works. How are these people getting hold of casks from these distilleries? Why are the distilleries letting them go, or how are they able to do it? How does it work? And I was trying to find, like, there must be something that they're doing that allows them to get stock from that place. And everyone that we've spoken to, every independent bottler, every person that does exactly, like, you know, what you guys do, the secret sauce is building good relationships with people. And as you've just said, like, the gatekeepers, when from a sales point of view you hear gatekeeper, you think, oh Christ, they're going to be a hard nut to crack. And as you've just said,
it's not about being a hard nut to. They might not have any stock that they're able to sell you because you're trying to purchase too little, or your price is too low, or whatever. Like, there's 100 reasons why they can't sell to you. But this industry is hospitality. I say it again because it really is. And even at the highest level, these guys want to do good things for this industry, and I love that. I mean, it's a great industry. So.
Well, we're getting to the time of the podcast where we ask our guests for their what 3 drams, any 3 drams that have some sort of meaning or story associated with them. So, Peter, have you done your homework? Do you have your what 3 drams?
I have not done my homework. So
I did panic this afternoon.
I can't tell you when anything was made or
no.
who did it or whatever, but I can tell you what my 3 drams are that mean something to me. And the first one is it's an old Leith blend called Bailey Nickel Jarvie. I don't know if you guys know it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It was around sort of turn of the war, and then it grew big turn of the war, and then was massive until the mid 2000s when it was purchased as part of the LVMH takeover of Glenmorangie and Ardbeg Company, and B&J, Bailey Nickel Jarvie from a Robert Burns poem was discontinued. It wasn't part of the luxury profile that Glenmoe and Ardbeg were, and rightly so.
Quite a boring white label on the bottle.
Quite boring white label, absolutely.
Not a very catchy name, really, if you weren't familiar with it.
But it was the malt drinker's whiskey. And it was a Leith whiskey.
Right.
2 really important things. It was reported to have 60% malt, Speyside predominant, a little bit of lowland grain, light sherry influence, and it's what all the dockers drank. You'd have your pint of Tennent's, and you'd have, or actually more commonly, you'd have a Belhaven or something, right over here. But you'd have a pint of heavy, and you'd have a B&J, and you drink that down at the Marksman at the bottom of Leith Walk, and that'd be your thing. Yeah. And when it got discontinued, there was a dark cloud that spread over Leith, and a real remorse for it leaving. But it's what Dad drank.
Okay.
And so we always had B&J in the house, and he wasn't a massive whiskey drinker. It's not like he's that guy.
Yeah.
But he would always give us a wee bit of B&J with lots of water to be able to taste it, and I loved that. And so it's a flavor profile that I miss and I can't get anymore. So it's actually the inspiration for homemade.
Yeah, and I'm fairly confident there's an open bottle in Mother Superior.
But that
is there? Fuck off. Is there actually? They're 400 quid.
Yeah, I think it might be open for a while, but yeah.
Well, I'm going to go down there.
There's definitely one there.
Don't say it. Don't. I need to go down there before this.
Before this comes out. But that's such an interesting story because, I mean, it kind of echoes. I mean, you know, the bottle that was there when you were growing up is just such a. I mean, it's
we all had it, right? We all had it, right?
We all had it, but it's also such a relevant theme on these What 3 Drams. It's like people remember, like, well, my dad always drank this, or my granddad always had a bottle of that in the house. And I mean,
I mean, loads of B&Js were going on down in Leith Docks at that time. Exactly.
Wow. Down Salamander Street.
But even to the extent that we Graham bought a couple of auction bottles, and there was a 1970s bottle of Dimple Pinch amongst it.
Aye.
And we all tried it. We opened it. We had a crack at it, and there was a 1980s Valentine's as well.
It was delicious.
But then after that recording, my mother had actually been listening or had seen the thing and said, "Your great grandfather always had a bottle of Dimple Pinch on the sideboard."
That's amazing.
And it's just like one of these stories.
Feeling like Kinchy.
I mean, when you look at the nostalgia, you talk about like bringing people to flavour experiences, and there'll be a hell of a lot of nostalgia associated. So,
absolutely,
when you suddenly smell something for the first time in a long time, or you taste something for the first time in a long time, it takes you straight back to a memory.
The weirdest feeling, isn't it?
It's really strange when you could do that, and I suppose like having that family.
I tried Banana Angel Delight the other day for the first time in about 20 years, and I just went boom, right back to being like 7.
But when you release a whiskey based off of that experience, let me
we
know.
It's coming,
it's coming next.
That's a great first dram. Okay, so dram number 2.
Bourbon Glenmurray.
Have you ever? So there's an amazing. Do you know cask whiskey? A woman called Justine. She's
Justine Hazelhurst.
Yeah, historian.
Yeah. Is she not part of Fife Whisky Festival?
Yeah, she is. But my goodness me, I went on a walking tour around Leith with her. I was just blown away by her knowledge, but also just the history of Leith and the blending history of Leith. We knew that it was huge, right? And I think that we've scratched the surface, and we're like, it's all about Leith, and we're very proud of where we're from, and we give it a lot of thought and a lot of attention, and we've written some blog entries about it. But being able to walk around and with her and her saying, just pointing out every single like.
I think we should try and get her on the podcast.
We've tried.
I think you need her on the podcast.
Yeah. I'd love to get her.
She should be charging hundreds of pounds
for her knowledge,
for bringing people around, and definitely write a book. Justine, if you're reading this,
listening.
I think she.
What did I say?
Justine, if you're reading this, she's reading the book she's not already written.
If you're listening to this, please write a book.
And come on the podcast because I mean, you look at like the Patterson brothers. I mean, I actually worked on Constitution Street for a short period of time.
That's at the Patterson building.
Yeah, and suddenly, and it wasn't. And I walked past it. And then it was in the build-up to actually starting this podcast when one of the things we were looking at is what are the stories of whiskey, and the Patterson brothers fascinates me. And then you walk, and suddenly, as soon as you know what you're looking for, and I'd imagine that's
the Patterson building.
Well, I'm aware of it. Yeah,
on Constitution Street.
Yeah,
wasn't a Patterson building. They built it for one of their suppliers.
See, I mean, that's it. It's fascinating. Like the history.
Thanks, Justine.
But there you go. But I mean, to go to the history that's associated with these things is fantastic. And again, like whiskey has seemed like the whiskey industry the marketing has all gone to the stories of the Highlands, the Speyside, Islay, and things like that, and it's because that's where all the surviving distilleries have been for the last 100 odd years. But it's easy to forget the history that Edinburgh actually has in the whiskey industry, and Leith. There'll be Leithers who are sitting there going, "No, Edinburgh, pal, it's Leith."
It's not Edinburgh.
But the point is, like, you look at that. I mean, I can't remember how many docks around the UK, but Leith was one of so many that were bonded or whatever it was to able to import and export.
Yeah, that's right. So you'd see a essentially north. So think about Liverpool up. You had Edinburgh bringing in rum, wine, sherry, brandy. All these types of things, and it's where the Scotch distilleries consolidated a lot of their casks, and so it was the natural blending spot.
Yeah.
For a lot of companies, it's where it grew,
and cooperage as well. There was a cooperage in it as
absolutely.
well. You know, where for all these unneeded and unused and unwanted casks that have been brought in from all around the world, emptied, and then gone, we don't need them anymore. There was a cooperage there to redo them, and then probably send them up to the whiskey industry or to the blenders.
And you didn't have to send them far. Send them across the road.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
there
like,
you go.
That was it. But so it's I love it. And I just think everybody should go and give Justine a follow, because she quite often posts stuff on her Instagram that I just go, I now know that, and I'm going to use it a lot. Yeah, a lot of cemeteries.
I seen that video today.
Yeah. So I mean, send her a message. Christ, the camera's gone off again. Send her a message and tell her, get on the Whiskey Stories podcast. Right, we're back live and rocking and rolling.
You'll have to do a really cringy. So you were saying?
Testing.
What we all do is this again, isn't it? So Peter, tell us about your second dram.
I've been on a journey.
Absolutely. I did go on a journey. No, the second whiskey is. Now, we talked very briefly, I think it might have even been off the podcast, about best bang for buck whiskey.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And here's my take on it. Actually, it's one of. I think I've got a couple.
Oh, bonus.
Are you sticking a bonus dram in, are you?
No, I'm not going to stick in a bonus dram.
It's not against the rules.
But I am going to talk about value versus taste versus perception, right? And I think those are really important things. And when I think that those three add up to something really great, you then end up with an outstanding whiskey. And for me, that would be a Bowmore 15.
Oh, right.
Right?
Darkest.
Not dark. Is that...
That's how it was previously known.
That was previously known, yeah, absolutely. But it's sherry cask, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a really difficult flavour combination to get right, which is smoke plus sherry. I think you can over-egg the omelette both ways, right? Mm-hmm. You can go too big on the smoke, you can go too big on the sherry.
Sure.
And I think for me, the perfect balance and the yardstick that I aim for is a Bowmore 15 when I'm looking at that combination. Mm-hmm. I think that it has the sherry without too much tannin, which for me is the right side.
Yeah.
I don't want a sherried whiskey to be tannic and bitter. I want it to have a bit of leather in the background, but I want there to be the soft fruit and the sweetness when I look at that type of colour.
Sure.
And I think that the smoke complements it really well in that specific whiskey. I think there's a lot of sherried smoky whiskies.
100%.
And I think that for 50 quid,
I couldn't agree more.
for a 15-year-old
That's not bad.
single malt from Islay that's got a ton of, that's 100% sherry.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
I think Bowmore's my favourite distillery, to be honest. But one thing I want to bring up before you go into your third dram is I remember you talking about a dream blend to me and Charlie McLean, and your dream.
Do you blend in your dreams now?
Well, no. So, it was Talisker and Springbank.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things that, because
And
doesn't
Clynelish.
exist. And was it Clynelish showed that waxiness of
Nah,
Clynelish? as well?
Clynelish, Talisker, Springbank.
Yeah. I thought that was really interesting because it says a lot about the whiskey you like.
Yeah.
And I think that Bowmore, I'm always happy when I'm drinking Bowmore, and I think the Bowmore 15, the only thing that could make it better would be higher percentage.
I think it's 43, but you're looking at a whiskey there that's 50 quid, 55 quid,
value.
whatever. I think it's around. Don't quote me on that. Not them on.
We could get you to do the sniff it, sip it, score it, 1 minute whiskey.
But it's not a
Great.
deer whiskey,
No,
you know. It's
no.
and it's. I think that when you think about the three things that I look for in a whiskey, which is texture, clarity, and balance, it hits them all perfectly. And I'm surprised about how many whiskies don't fulfill that.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the difficulties as an independent bottler is you don't get to choose where you hit those three.
That's good. Okay.
And your final dram.
Dram number 3. Now you can go on brand if
You're
you
allowed
like.
one on brand, but you don't have to go on brand.
Like, I love Woven. I love the whiskies that I've made, but and I would happily get behind every single one of them and tell you that they are, beautiful in their own ways, and they are. But,
They are yummy.
but I don't want to pick one of my ones because, well, if I was to pick one, I think that Experience 17 Synchronicity is one of the best whiskies that I've made, and I really love it, and I think that it is an exceptional whiskey, but that's beside the by.
You know the dram I want you to do?
Mate,
are you tempted?
I'm not tempted. I don't want to.
Don't let Ross influence you what to eat drams,
Ross
Peter.
can tell you about a good whiskey that we
No,
had.
you can watch it on a YouTube channel, but they're not getting another mention on this until they actually give us some sponsorship.
It was very nice. But the third whiskey might be one that you don't expect, and it's Cask Prohibition.
Ooh.
That is one of the best contemporary blends in the world.
Yeah.
It has a high ABV. I think it's 51, 50. I can't remember what it is exactly. I haven't done my research, but it's a higher ABV. It's got that big oomph of spice and a little bit of smoke coming through, and I just think it's great. I don't have a very exciting story about it. I just think that in terms of a whiskey that I buy quite regularly, it's the only. I was thinking about it in the car over here, right? And I was thinking, it's the only bottle I've bought pretty much every year for the last 5 years.
Really?
Yeah.
And I go through it. I've got a lot of whiskey in my house. I've got a lot of whiskey kicking about, and it's a bottle that I will happily buy full price.
And what are you expecting to pay for a bottle of that?
Is it 40 quid? 30 quid?
Well, it's less than that. So I just googled it there online. You can get it Master Malt for £26.95.
Yeah,
so there you are.
I mean, yeah. Cask Prohibition, absolutely wonderful whiskey.
I'll sell you one for 40 quid.
Fair enough.
This camera's going to die one more time.
Right,
Not yet. We've got one last thing to do.
This doesn't normally happen. This camera doesn't normally die 6 times in the podcast. But
I mean,
you just kept
it's
going,
died a few times before, but six times
I really
for the
feel like I
record.
have as well, and I'm really embarrassed about it.
No, you're good.
I've just gone, this is the Pete show, right? Here we fucking go.
Okay, so
We've got a challenge.
Okay.
We were set. You're tired of it. Jet lag.
you should edit these 2 wee bits out.
Sorry.
So all content is content, Ross.
Not this bit.
I don't know. This is
gold.
It's Tuesday. So
You trying to make the edit a bit easier? No, I won't edit this bit out. Why do you guys not get pies in? What are you doing?
yeah. I'm a toasty man when it comes to athletic arms.
Aye, the toasties are hard to beat.
I've never had a toasty here.
153.
Right,
So 145, 153 are your two like moments.
Write them down on that.
Kinda silent.
That pen, 145. That makes it in and a bit easier. Right.
A great 3 stories of Pete.
Round
Wasn't a
drams.
story.
Two
It's a
blended
good
whiskies.
whiskey.
I've got to say, like,
Fantastic.
if anything, you were too down to earth.
Right.
I've got no problem
I
with that.
personally would have chucked in a dram that Pete did try, which was a Springbank 1919, that I remember you saying was particularly tasty.
Well,
It was the best whiskey I've ever had in my life. I'll tell you that. It was a 1919 Springbank, bottled in 1969, 50 years old, bottled at 37% ABV. Was the best whiskey I've ever had in my life. But
Well-
I'm happy with it as that,
Yeah.
having had it.
Until next time.
fantastic. Well, what we do have to finish us off is, Ross, you were away, you missed Whisky Fringe. And I know that you're a big fan of Whisky Fringe, and for Angus and I, it was the first time we'd ever been there.
Yeah.
Big thanks to Royal Mile Whiskies. You'll be able to check out all the content that we created for that. But one of the things that we created, which you won't have seen, was Duggie set us a challenge whilst we were there. 15 minutes before I'll take that glass as well, Angus, if you can charge your glass. So 15 minutes before the end of the Whisky Festival, we were given the challenge by Duggie. Okay, of all the exhibitors, you've got go and find Ross a dram that he will taste blind, and we will give him the tasting of it, what the dram is, and talk him through that whole dram.
Great.
So we've got these wee little bottles here, which
So
we've
you've
kept.
both chosen one of these each.
Aye, we ran through. I'll be honest, when you see the video, thankfully I bumped into a good pal of yours, Fraser Soonis.
Or did you do a video when you were doing this?
We were videoing.
Oh, okay.
It was like Blair Witch Project at a whiskey festival. Right. I'll pass this on to Ross. So this is Angus's dram. Now, Angus, without telling him what
I
it
appreciate
is,
this, gentlemen.
go through the tasting. Tell them what we're expecting here. Give them let's see what we've learned in our journey as whiskey podcast hosts.
I don't know how well I'll be able to do this, but I think what you'll find. I mean, can I tell them about it without naming?
Tell them.
So you're dealing with something there, first fill bourbon. So we're all. I know you're a big fan of that to begin with, right? So it's.
That's the only thing I could have told you about this dram.
Have a taste of it. But I think
was it upstairs or downstairs?
It was upstairs.
So is it an official bottling?
It's not an official distillery bottling.
Interesting.
It's an independent bottling.
It's very tasty.
So it's a single cask.
I'll hand some to my blender friend. See what he thinks of it as well.
It's a single cask. I can tell you. Do you want an age?
Sure.
I can tell you it's 8 year old.
8 years old.
8 years old. First fill bourbon. Single cask.
It's got a really nice nose. It's fresh.
Yeah.
It's what you know I like. Have a taste.
Chardonnay grape.
It was very much, but also so it's bottled by Adelphi. Bottled by Adelphi. It's a 8-year-old Chichibu. Japanese. So.
Well, you don't get bad Chichibus generally.
No, I thought it was a bit of a solid bet, if we're being honest.
I actually went to my first ever Chichibu tasting a week before I went away.
That's right. Did you have it?
No, Adelphi. I've never had an Adelphi Chichibu.
Brilliant, because I thought I'd try and get you something you probably haven't had
genuinely
before.
Interesting dram, and that's kind of what I hoped. When Duggie said, normally I go Whisky Fringe Saturday and Sunday, depending how successful the Saturday is. And so Duggie said, had I known the date, I genuinely might have changed the date of the wedding.
Shut up.
And Dougie's like, I'll get like a little pack together. So I'm assuming this is essentially
I hope
your wife is very affording.
His current wife. Now, this here, what you've got.
Wife. Now this is. Have you picked this?
I picked this with the help of Fraser Souness. He said that you would like this. He said
really?
and now what I will say is that Angus decided against picking a half-time orange dram.
So that wasn't a half-time orange.
No.
That was just something that was
pretty
there.
good. They were just pouring
but I don't think
the Adelphi stand killed it this year.
It's sold out anywhere I looked online. You're not.
It's got a savoury, musty, kind of dusty nose.
This is a lot older.
Oh, the palate's fantastic. The nose and the palate are
What I'll say about this is a single cask, single grain.
yeah.
From a distillery that actually that was mentioned and is a Watt 3 drams of a recent previous
Is
guest.
this a canvas?
No.
Oh.
But you're not. It starts with C.
This is Carsebridge.
No.
Oh.
This is a Carsebridge.
A Carsebridge, which Fraser mentioned.
Yes.
Because he'd never had it before.
45-year-old Carsebridge.
Yeah, pretty cool.
It's got a weird end note though, right?
1976.
It's funny. I actually don't love the nose, but
Douglas
I like
Lane.
the palate.
Do you get a little bit of sulfur?
Douglas Lang.
Douglas Lane. Yeah.
Douglas Lang.
Really cool.
Dougal from Douglas Lang gave us this. But this was a challenge.
I kind of get a little bit kind of school rubbers.
Yeah.
Which I like kind of glue and plastic and stuff in my grain whiskey.
There you go.
I'm delighted with
And
that.
of course, Carsebridge, no longer a distillery.
Yeah.
It was actually Graham and Serena who talked about the Carsebridge. They had, I think, one of their Watt 3 drams was a Carsebridge 43-year-old.
Oh, was it? I thought theirs was a canvas.
So this is a Carsebridge 45-year-old, 1976. That was the whiskey. That was the half-time orange.
Well,
for Douglas Lang. There you go.
Class, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. A Chichibu and a
Well, thanks to
Carsebridge.
Duggie and thanks to the Royal Mile Whiskies for having us on. Now, what I will say is just very quickly before we finish off the podcast.
Before the camera dies.
Before the camera dies again, and I've got a load of editing to do. What I would say is that next Thursday, as you listen, if you listen to this as soon as the podcast has been downloaded, Thursday the 29th, we are hosting our first ever Indie Bottler Spotlight with Woodrow's of Edinburgh at the Kilderkin Pub. We'll be in there. Tickets are available.
They might still be available.
They might still be available because they are going fast. It is a whiskey tasting, whiskey stories podcast shenanigans. Right, we've got 6 incredible drams lined up for Woodrow's of
So
Edinburgh.
Woody and Megan are hosting.
Wood-
and you've got a podcast going.
We are hosting. They will be talking about their stuff, how they do it. We've got the blend, Longmorn 14, Mortlach 10, Teaneck 10, Strathmill 33, and Inchfad 5. That is what you're getting. 6 drams. And Kev from Diggers texted me last night and says, Kilderkin will chuck in a highball, a cocktail on arrival.
Lovely.
Very good.
6 drams and a cocktail, 20 quid. Can I get better?
6
That's
drams,
good.
but you're also getting a bit of chat with Ross.
and Peter from Woven said, the experience. Right, that's exactly what we've got.
You will be on a journey that evening.
We will be on a journey. Pete, how can people find out more about Woven? How can people find out about yourself? How can people get in touch? What do they do?
Yeah, so we're pretty active on social medias. So we've got our Instagram, but the best way to go deep diving is on our website, where we have essays, blog posts, studies, and all the information about all the whiskies that we can possibly share.
Right.
And then just a quick mention about what you've got going on in London this year.
Yeah, so we've got a pop up. No, we don't. We've got a residency, I should say, between September and November at 155 Hoxton Street, which is the old White Lion space.
That's so exciting.
So we're going to be doing some really interesting stuff there. It would be great to get you guys down to do a session as well. Going to be doing. You can expect to find us there, as well as a blending lab.
That's really exciting.
And we're going to be taking people on journey through.
Really excited to see what's going to be happening with Woven in this second chapter.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for coming in, Pete. Thanks for all your great chat.
Thanks
for
you
your
so
what
much.
3 drams. Big thanks to everybody who listens. Please don't forget to carry on listening to the pod, like and subscribe,
5
get involved
stars.
in our social media, give us 5 stars, give us some of the reviews have been fantastic. I looked into them a little bit more. They're all your dad.
Is it actually just your dad?
He's great.
That's amazing. Well done, son.
Actually, you know something what's quite funny is when the camera's died, I'm going to stick the camera on. What's quite funny is when Ross's dad does comment, he just slaughters you and he just says
Podcast guys, you're shite, Ross.
Exactly. Well, listen, thank you so much for everybody who listens. Thanks for everybody who's already bought their ticket for the Indie Bottler Spotlight next Thursday. Please carry on, join the Facebook group, give us a like on Facebook, give us a like on Instagram or follow on Instagram. The Whisky Stories pod. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Pete. Thanks for coming on. Great to see everybody. Thanks, Angus. Well done to the Athletic Arms. And welcome back, Ross. I tell you what, he's looking knackered. You've been a busy boy. You've been a busy boy the last few weeks.
That's it.
Aye, absolutely fantastic. Cheers, guys. All the best. Thank you very much. Bye.